Greenwood campus. That is 210 Pansy Road, Hodges, South Carolina. And so we're here this evening. We're starting just a tad bit early. Want to give the opportunity for our speaker to share some information with you and bring you up to speed. He's with us here at the Greenwood campus. He will be with us tomorrow at the Greenville campus, and that'll be at 1427 Suite E Lawrence Road in Greenville, South Carolina. And he'll be there to take your questions. Please come in person, because there may be something you want to talk to him about your career that I don't have the answers for, and maybe your HR department won't tell you. And then he's agreed to go with me on Friday. I will be down in the Clinton. So those that are in Lawrence and Newberry, Newberry's not that far, but Lawrence, Gray Court, and Clinton area, we will be there at 543 Coleman Road. We'll be there at Greater Faith Apostolic Church, and he's going to come because I'm going to share with them some information. So it is a privilege to have him. And why is he here? Because I've been teaching about successful living. We do our church anthem. I am the seed that grows and advances the kingdom. For so winning this word of God that I received today is not only for me, but to be shared with others that they may grow in Christ as well as myself for the purpose. Now I want to clear this up real quick. Anything that I share with you is never to hurt you or to bother you, to offend you. But he and I was having a conversation. What did you call it? Self-awareness?
Yes, self-awareness.
You have to have self-awareness in order to know how to move in your life. And so part of successful living is knowing how to balance my life from an economic standpoint, social standpoint, and from a career standpoint. So he is a director with HR, and so there are many things that he can share with us, how to start our career, how to evaluate our career. And he had something, we were coming down the highway, and he was telling me about 3 circles. And that's why I'm excited, because I'm excited to learn. Learning doesn't offend me. Learning is something that I need to open up. And when I can find great people who have great resources, who have real substance, and I always tell people, God's looking for people who got real issues, looking for God for real solutions. And you can spit and pop and jump into church all you want to, but that's not going to increase your salary. And that's not going to help you understand the benefits and the things that you need in life. So this is why I'm excited for him to be here, because he's a wealth and a well of knowledge. And so I lean on him. He's in Hawaii where he has it made and be riding his bicycle. And I'd be like, dude, how do you do 50 miles? I don't think I could do 50. But my problem is every mile I do, something in my mind says you got to go back the same way you came. And so he shared with me that it's so beautiful on the islands that when he rides, everywhere he goes, he just has all this beautiful weather. And so what he's going to do is I'm going to give the floor to him, ask him a couple questions, but I really want him to pour into you. And so please join us tomorrow for those that are in the Greenville, Powdersville area, I think Taylor's, Greer, Spartanburg. Come on out. It'll be about 30, 40 minutes. You can talk to him and you can get some answers and some directions, because he's the real deal. So at this time, I want to thank all of you for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to Daniel O'Neill Cohen, who is a HR director with one of the top Fortune 500 companies in the world. Not in the U.S., but in the world. Daniel, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Good.
Yes, I do love riding my bicycle, and I'll just tell a little story. The longest ride I've done this year is 72 miles. And you said, well, how do you ride 72 miles or 51 miles or 60? But I just didn't start right at 72. There's preparation. And so in everything that you do, it takes knowledge, skills, and ability. So the knowledge part for riding, that long distance is I needed to know what type of bike I needed. I needed to know all the mechanics about the bike. I needed to understand how it plays into the riding conditions, the road. And so there's a lot of preparation, the tire pressure on my bike. And trust me, I went through a lot of mistakes, had a lot of flat tires, but that was a learning process.
So we shouldn't have a problem when we make mistakes.
No, you're gonna make mistakes. If you're moving in the right direction, you're gonna make mistakes. The second component of it is the skills And so you have to practice, and I don't like the word, when they say practice makes perfect. No, to me, it's you apply effective effort. You do the right thing all the time, and you'll get better. And that's what I mean by effective effort. And your ability will build up. And so knowledge, skills, and ability, whenever you're thinking about doing something and getting better at something, those three things are going to come into play.
Knowledge,
skills, and ability.
So all the writers out there, when you get ready to pursue something, you got to have the knowledge,
the skills,
and
ability. And so, for example, I have a goal this year to ride 2,500 miles in 1 year. Last year I rode 2,000 miles. So I upped my miles by 500 this year. So my goal is 2,500 miles. I've got about 800 more miles to go, so I'm ahead of plan. But how I achieve that is every week I say I'm going to ride at least 60 miles a week. And so I break that down a few miles every day. And so when you plan, it's just like if you're planning to save money, if you're planning for anything, everything needs a plan. And the point I'm making here is even your career. Now, there's a difference between a job and a career.
Well, now we're in the South. Mm-hmm. And you and I were discussing, we're older, just get a job. Mm-hmm. So you're going to explain to us the difference between a job and a career.
Yes, a job is, if you're working, you have a job and you're actually doing something, performing some duty for a certain amount of pay. That's like a contract between you and whatever company, and we all have different types of jobs. Now, when you add all of the time up and all the different jobs that you've had, if there's no rhyme or reason to how they connect, then you just had jobs. A career is something that you build upon. For example, you may start out in a job as an entry-level position. You learn all you can out of that job. Then it's time to move on to something bigger. And so what you're doing is you're preparing yourself for that next role, which in most cases should be something with more increasing responsibility. With increasing responsibility, sometimes comes with increasing pay along with it. But when you plan out those moves where you want to go into the future, that's what I mean by planning a career. And there are certain things that you have to think about when you're moving from point A to point B as you advance your career, because it just doesn't happen overnight. Now, the most important thing that I think people miss is this concept of what we call pie, P-I-E. I'm not talking about apple pie. I'm not talking about cherry pie. Performance is a P, performance. I stands for image, and E stands for exposure. Now, performance is what we are expected to do. We are expected to do our job very well, and we get performance evaluations, and it's kind of like our adult report card, if you will, and we are paid to perform. So performance is what we call the entry ticket to play the game. Everybody has to perform.
Okay.
Now, so that's the entry ticket. There's nothing special. Well, what are you saying, Dan? You're saying I don't have to work hard. Yes, you have to work hard, but it's not the only thing when it comes to advancing a career. The second piece is image. And image is about how the organization perceives you. Are you dressed for success for that next level? What is your reputation? Are you someone that could be trusted? Are you seen as a person with empathy and that you care? It's all of those things, those characteristics that good leaders have and good employees have, and that's tied up in what we call image. That's very important. The higher you go in an organization, images becomes more important.
Okay, I need you to put that in lay terms. So you're saying how I carry myself, as well as on all social media platforms. If a company is looking to elevate me, they just don't look at me in the interview. They look at everything that I'm engaged in, because I've heard that companies go and look at your social media page. They go and look at how you're living, how you dress. So you're telling me I just can't go in to a corporate job looking any kind of way?
No, every company has its own culture, and I think just like every family has a culture, if someone came into your family, they're not going to change your family culture. It's
Okay.
ingrained in your family name. Every company has its culture. So
I
you're
can't take
not-
little Reggie.
No, little Reggie, you're not going to come into the company culture and change the company. I mean, I'm not saying you have to change yourself.
Right.
It's assimilating or moving into the company the right way.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you have to physically change your hairstyle or anything like that. It's how you carry yourself. Your image is very, very important. And you bring up a good point, Reggie, about the social media. Most companies have a social media policy.
Ooh.
And so, for example, if you are out and you're maybe, let's say, you're spewing hate or something against a different group of people, and if your company sees that, you're a representative of that company, there will be, could be consequences behind that. So your reputation is everything. It's social media, it's how you carry yourself. And so that's very important, image. Now, the third component I mentioned is exposure. And exposure, kind of look at it as who knows you. I mean, who in the organization that you work for knows you, especially the leaders within that organization.
So I just can't put church folk on my resume.
Well, if you want to be a pastor, because they're going to have more influence.
Okay, I'm just trying to, because when I came along, seriously, because he told me, we had a conversation, and don't lose your train of thought, about how he went to an interview with some MC Hammer pants on. And I was 11 years old carrying a briefcase, and when I started doing resumes, all I had on my resume was church stuff. And all my references was church people. And that got me a job washing dishes.
But exposure is important, because who knows you? Because now, if you take a whole dollar, 100%, and most people would say that out of those three, performance, image, exposure, you may guess that maybe exposure is the most important, or you may say image is the most important, or you may say performance is the most important. And let me tell you, take that whole dollar, 10%, performance,
Okay.
10%. So when we were told, work hard, you'll get ahead, that's what our probably grandparents, parents, that's what they knew. And that's what most people were told. Work hard. It's more than that. Now, take 30 more cent, 30, that's 30%. That's image. So how you carry yourself and your reputation, your political savviness, how you say the right things, all of that stuff. That stuff that makes you, the stuff that makes you a good saint is the same thing that makes you a good employee too. I mean, it's the core of just being a good person is typically what it boils down to, your reputation. That's 30%. So that leaves 60%.
Correct.
Exposure. Who knows you? Now, that's the people that could make things happen for you. And typically those are the individuals that are higher up in the organization. And so when we say there's an upward mobility formula, How do you move up? Is image and exposure.
Wow.
Have the right image and the right people that know you. What I mean by that know you, they know the good work that you've done. They've known your reputation as a person. You have a solid image. Those are the people that get discussed when it's time for promotional opportunities, because we all are paid to perform. Again, that's the equalizer. And we think that for the most part that working hard is the way to get ahead. It's important. That just gets you discussed. Now, image and exposure is the 90% that is what's called the upward mobility formula. And this was a book written by a man named Harvey Cohen that came up with this concept, performance, image, exposure. And he was an African-American male engineer with the IBM many years ago when IBM started. And he kept wondering, why isn't he getting promoted? He was working hard. And he found out through time that it was because of image and exposure that opened the doors for moving his career forward. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is, I like to say, time waits for no one. All right? We all have a career start date, and we're going to have a career end date. Just like we are born into this world naturally, we will die someday. We have a career. It starts, and at some point you're going to retire. Now, typically a person may work 40 years. And so you think about the first 10 years. Think about that as let's think about a basketball game. There are 4 quarters in a basketball game. So the first quarter, as you're watching that basketball game, that's the first 10 years of your work life. By the time the next 10 years, that's 20 years, you're at halftime. You're in the locker room figuring out, rubbing your head, hey, am I going to win this? Is this career thing going to end the way I want it to end? So you're halfway through your career. Now, when you get 30 years in, hopefully we know what we're doing. We've been at it for 30 years. We should know something. But that's a mark. And then 40. And so the first, let's say, 8 years is called exploration. You're just starting out. You're just learning whatever your craft. You just got out of college, or you just got out of trade school, you just got out of high school, or you're just starting work. Whatever you're doing, you're learning the ropes. And that's called exploration. Then you start, when you get into about 9, 10, 12 years, now you got some experience, and now you're in what is called early in career phase. Early in career phase. And a lot of times people wake up right then and says, I don't think I want to do this. I want to really do this. They make moves. If you ask someone what their very first job was, and if they got 20 or 30 years, if you ask, what do you do? Have you always done this? A lot of people will say, no. I was an engineer, and now I'm over here in HR. And so, but so you make decisions as you go through this process. Then you start getting into mid-career. Now, by the time interesting things happen with people during mid-career, because now you're starting to talk, 15, 20, 25 years in. And most people probably married, they've got kids, off to college, there's all kind of competing things, mortgages, all kind of stuff. And people tend to have midlife crises, and a lot of stuff are coming in around that 20, 25 years, because again, time waits for no one. If you have ambitions and you says, well, I thought I would have been president of the company by now, or I thought I would have been plant manager, or I thought I would have been department manager, and I'm not. Those kind of things hit certain people, and they wonder, was this all in vain? And so mid-career is a tough moment for many folks. Then you start moving into that 30-something year experience. Now you're late career, and there's a massive amount of responsibility. Each time you move in a different phase, whether you are an individual contributor, your job is just to do A, B, C, or if you're a manager or a leader, regardless, the more time you spend in these organizations, it comes with more responsibility, because most of the time you've probably moved up in a pay salary or structure. And so more responsibility, especially when you get to that third quarter, because more than likely you're developing and pulling other people forward and transferring what you know to them. And sometimes those individuals are going to leapfrog you because they're the future. Because again, remember, you started up, now you're on that downward slope and you're coming down, but people are going to be coming by and leapfrogging you, and that's okay. And that takes a change for certain people to happen. We all hit a certain level that we're going to go, and if you've had a successful career, you're going to peak out at your maximum potential. And then the last phase, if you really have done things right, you'll walk out with no regrets. It's called legacy. Now, when I mean by legacy, when I've gone to a lot of retirement parties at work, and people gather, and sometimes the people come from afar and they talk about the person, their tears shed, their stories told. This person helped me, they developed me, they gave me my first chance of this and that, and they're great stories. There also been some retirements that you go to and they say, well, will somebody come up and say something about Dan? And it's crickets. And it's like, good riddance, I can't wait till he get out the building. You know, we all probably work with some people like, and so we're building towards a legacy. And so I was talking to Reggie when people ask me, well, what do you do? I could say, I'm an HR director, blah, blah, blah. But when I really have that answer to that question to people, this is what I tell them. I say, I help people, teams, and organizations reach their maximum potential. Think about that. That's what I do. I help people, teams, and organizations reach their maximum potential. And so as a coach, as an HR coach, what I do every day, is that's what's on my mind, whether I'm meeting with one person, whether I'm meeting with a team, or if I'm talking to my whole organization. I've got that in the back of my mind, because what I want people to say when I retire, what about Dan? Oh, he helped me reach my maximum potential, or he helped me, my team, or he helped my organization. Because when you have that your own personal value statement, your own mission, and you try to live up to that every day, what happens then when you serve others and you don't put yourself in front of them, and you love what you're doing and you do it well, things tend to kind of fall into place for you. And that's what's happened with me. I had to learn that over the years. I was early in my career, I was very competitive. My training programs had to be the best, and I would make people cry because I didn't care what I said to them, and I was rough. I was rough.
I know somebody out there said, oh, yeah. Look at that one right beside you. There. See, they point like, yeah, that right there. Woo.
Oh, yeah, I was rough. But, and so I remember one time one of my bosses asked me to apologize to an employee, and I said, why? And she yelled back at me, because she's a human being. I'm like, okay, they're humans. Everybody's human. They have feelings. So.
You need to say that one again, because I know some people out there talking about, he always talk about feelings and emotions. No, he don't know that we human.
Right. But, empathy is something that I work at. And there's, if you take this thing called Strength Finders, there are 34 strengths. And you would think that empathy would be high for a person in HR. But it's not me. I'm an analytical, technical person. My number one strength is learner. But empathy, is a little bit down on the list for me. But I know it's important. And so I train myself to understand how to talk to people just based on their communication styles. This is a whole different subject when you talk about communication styles and how to address people based on how they want to be addressed. One of the final things I'd like to talk about
You got
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Oh, 10 more minutes.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
okay,
can roll.
okay. All right,
I'm
good.
like, I'm going to go back and replay this myself.
So we talked about performance, image, exposure. Now, what I want to talk about the 3 circles of leadership. That's a component, and it's leadership is everything. When you think about leaders, there are leaders in the church. There's leaders everywhere, and just not at work. There's leaders everywhere, and so don't think you're not a leader if you don't have the title of leader. You are leading something. If you're a deacon or you're leading something. And so there's picture a circle. The very first thing is we have to do is know yourself. Now, a lot of people say, I know who I am. I mean, really know yourself. The good, the bad, the ugly. What are the things that make you tick? What are the things that just set you off? What are the things that are just non-negotiable? What are the things that your pet peeves? Like for me, one of mine is being on time. I'm a numbers person, so if you're late with me, that's not a good thing. But I've learned that everybody can't be on time. They don't look at the world through my lens. I have one sister that's notoriously late. I won't call her name. She knows who she is. but I'm on the other side. I'm like, damn, I can always depend on you. You're going to be early. Yes. I mean, so, but we have to know those things about ourselves. And part of the exercise I have people go through knowing yourself is writing their own leadership philosophy. And that's a hard thing to do. But really know yourself. The second part of a good leader equally knows their people. Now, these could be people that work directly for you. They could be people, if you're head of an organization or a board, and the people that you're responsible for, you got to know them too, equally as well. And because you can't lead if you don't know your people, and take the time to know your people. Think about some of the best leaders or bosses you've ever had, and they probably took the time to say good morning. They probably knew if something was going on in your life, whether a child was sick or a parent was sick. They knew those things, or they would send you a birthday card, or they remembered those little things. Those are those leaders that take the time to know their people. Mm-hmm. Then you got some that just don't care. It's all about them. What can you do for me? And so a good leader knows their people. Now, the third component is know your craft. And what I mean by that is you got to constantly learn and stay current. I remember one time many years ago, I just said I wasn't going to give up my BlackBerry. And I finally had to give up my BlackBerry.
You're good.
And then I went and got a iPhone.
You didn't want to give up your BlackBerry?
No.
I didn't want to give up my...
I had an iPhone 4S. And this one of my little nephews says, Uncle, why your phone so small? He was telling me my technology was outdated. So nice, but I went from a 4S to a 10. Mm-hmm. And I thought about, then I reminded myself of a quote that I had written down when I was 23 years old, that I said I would always live by this. And I was sitting in my office one day, and I was just sitting there thinking, because I was looking at all of the other engineers that I work with, and they had just, I'm going to tell you how old I am now. We had just put computers on our desk. First time at work, computers, these big green monsters.
Yes.
They had just put them in the office. First time computers were ever put in an office. And so I'm in there learning everything I can about that. But all these other engineers, at the time they were in their 40s and something, and they looked old to me, but they wouldn't touch it. No, this new technology. And I learned everything I could about it. And then things changed. And I saw my whole department, the first time I ever experienced a downsizing or a layoff. And they all got wiped out. And I'm sitting in there, 8 of us in the cube, 1 left. And I'm sitting there by myself. And I went to work for 3 months without a boss in the department. I was so low on the totem pole, I think they just forgot about me. And I ran up to a manager. I've been sitting in this office for 3 months, and they just forgot about me. So then they moved me to another department. But as I was sitting there, I was just reflecting on what just happened, because I was like, wow. Because I remember my director at that time says, we've been here for 20-something years, and they never laid off anybody in my department. They got him first. So I wrote this quote, and I said, I'll never, never, never forget this. Dissatisfaction is a base for progress. Once you become satisfied, you become obsolete.
Wow.
You can't be satisfied. And that's what I mean by keeping your craft, learning your craft, always if there's something new, technology that's out there in the game, learn it. If there's something new, get a book, read it. I read at least 1 or 2 books a month. I'm constantly learning something. Now, learner is my number one strength, but I just love to learn. But I said, dissatisfaction is a base for progress.
Say that slow. Dissatisfaction. It's okay to be dissatisfied.
Oh yeah, it's okay to be dissatisfied. It's the base for progress. Because once you're satisfied, you become obsolete. It's just like if you use a phone and it's always constantly doing what? The ISO systems, at least they'll upgrade, fix this bug. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're sitting there or you're still working on some old level of Windows, next thing you know, your computer won't work, or your ISOs, software gets updated all the time. So what they're doing is they're fixing stuff. They're progressing. And the same thing with our career. If you're a doctor, if you're a forklift driver, I don't care what you do, you got to be the best at what you do. And the way you do that is constantly learn and constantly develop.
I want you to break this out real quick. We've got about 3 to 5 minutes left. You can't be a forklift driver trying to live like a doctor. Am I right?
Oh yeah, well they all have different pay bands.
Okay. We're going to get into that tomorrow. You cannot, and so what happens to people is they want to be successful, but they miss one of the parts that you were talking about, self-evaluation and application. You can't want what other people have and not do what other people do. And with an HR director, I just want you to clear this up. Is anybody going to give you anything?
No.
Now, you could have said that a little nicer.
No, this is just not. It's just not going to happen.
It's just
not going to happen. No.
No matter how many years I've worked there.
Not unless there's like a blanket pay raise for everybody.
That's what I wanted to get to.
Right.
Many people who have not invested in themselves, they get a blanket pay raise. Mm-hmm. And then when that job goes away, if he or she has not gotten trade skills, education skills, you go back into general population and you go to a temporary place, and where you were making $17 to $25 an hour because you received a blanket raise, you're not going to get that where you're going. So you're making 20, living like you're making 35, and if your company shuts down, because the other side that this guy don't tell y'all is he opens companies, but he also phases out companies. He ain't gonna you see how he said that? I wouldn't want him to be my boss. He'd be like, no, y'all go.
I've started facilities up, and I've gone in to shut facilities down, and it's always it's easier to hire people and staff up a whole site versus to go in and shut something down. But one of the things that I want to stress too is that when every job, when I look back at my career, and I've had people look at it, my resume, say, wow, this is impressive, but it was planned. And I intentionally will not take another role if I can't answer a few things. What am I going to learn, and how is it going to make me better? What new tool or what new thing am I going to be able to put in my tool belt? Because when I leave this job and go for my next one, what people don't understand, when you're interviewing and when you're you're competing. There's other people going after that. So it's a competition. And so what you're doing is, I got to prepare myself for the future. If I'm doing a job that can't prepare me for the future, again, time waits for no one. I'm wasting my time. And if you're lucky, if you've had two jobs in a 10-year period, remember going back to that first quarter, second quarter. So if you go in 10 years and you've had 2 jobs, that's 25% of your career already gone. Time waits for nobody. Now, one thing I'll finish on is overtime. There is overtime when you retire. There's also work still to be done. When you think about working in your community, when you're serving, I mean, you bring those skill sets with you. Just because you retired on your corporate or your company job, that it's not over. You should still be giving back to your community in some kind of capacity. And that's when you bring your skills to your second phase. And I always tell people, may you have many overtimes. That's a long life.
Well, and I think, as he gets ready to close, this is what I run into in the church world. People have skills on their job, but they won't bring them to church. And this is why many ministries do not ever get off the ground. And most people want to run to a ministry that is successful and great. But whatever skills you've learned, just like you say in the overtime area, you should bring that intellect and intelligence to the ministry. You should bring those degrees and those tools to the ministry. The problem is, in many ministries, everybody's fighting to get to the top, where in ministry you work together as a team. That's why I was so ecstatic about him coming, because he can say things and show you a different way of saying it. That's teamwork. Ministry is not about an isolated person. It's about you bringing your skills and your motor skills and your intellect and all of that, and we come together. Now we're more effective as a ministry, and it goes beyond the walls of being a church. So now we worship God and we can serve people. I've ran into my 18 plus years as a pastor, people want to hear, but they don't want to get involved, and they don't want to be held accountable. Well, they're paying you on your job. I don't know how you're going to inherit eternal life and never done anything eternal in the church. So now you can, and that's what I keep saying. And so people come in church and they like, oh, nobody asked me to do nothing. I ain't me doing nothing, nobody. And I love what you said, overtime. Those skills should cross over in the ministry, whether it's with youth, whether it's community action, whether it's food bank. You should bring those skills in the house. When the Bible says, so there will be meat in my house, skills in my house. But we come in because we ain't got no position in corporate, and I'm mad at you because you are a director of HR, and I'm just somewhere in the building. So now I'm going to be at odds with you when we should be working together to make the city and the county and the community better. I love that point about overtime. And so people get mad at me. I'm like, why don't you bring your skills to the ministry? Hey, I just want to come in and just sit down. Well, who need a church full of people just sitting down? Then you get too old to do anything. So I love that about overtime. Now tell us a little about what we're going to hear tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow, what do you want to know tomorrow?
You the book, man. I'm just here. I'm just looking right now.
Probably go into more detail around the planning part of the career, because there are certain steps and things that people should start, whether you have a child in school or just entering college or just coming out of college. I mean, there's certain things that we do to prepare ourselves for that very first job. I mean, even if it's that first job out of high school, that's starting out the gate, and then there's also other things that we can do, for those of us that have more experience, and we're in the latter stages of our career. But I'll focus more on the front end of it tomorrow, because there are a lot of things that I think people miss as missed opportunities, especially by the time they get to high school, and why it's so important to really zone in on not even understanding what you want to do, but preparing that base, the importance of the schools, the grades, preparing for that base, because what you don't want to do is to waste the first 5 to 10 years of your career. Again, it's going to be about 20% of your whole total work life. So how you come out the gate really makes a big difference on the back end when we're thinking about retiring. And ultimately, what you want to do is get in a position where you can accumulate, and so when you are able to retire and take care of yourself, your family, and pass something on to the next generation, I think it's very important. And that starts with how we start our careers. Unless you're born a millionaire, most of us have to work, save money, and to me, I think the best blessing you can give to the generations coming behind you is leaving them with something. But that takes sacrifice, that takes preparation, and maximizing your career. That's why these decisions we make along the way make a big difference on the back end. And you want to position the next generation to be in a better position than we've been blessed. Because I can see just in my own family that, our parents set us up in the best they could, and
right.
We're doing okay, but we need to keep that going within successive generations, and it all starts with education before we get to the corporate world. And there's a whole lot of learnings that come with that.
So tomorrow we'll talk about how to come out the gate, because if we're struggling to take care of our parents now, I promise you the generation coming behind us, they're not going to know how to take care of you. Right. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 1427 Suite E, Lawrence Road. We'll begin around 6:45. He will hit the floor around 6:50, and he will tell us about how to come out the gate. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you soon. God bless you. I'll talk to you later.